Hey, I want to welcome you to this week's special podcast on parenting. We've been taking parenting questions from Generations Christian Church people online and in the church, as we've had 2 weeks so far of just this broad topic of parenting. So I'm joined with my wife, BFF, friend
Yeah,
who's
I'm wait,
traveling.
Johnny. I mean, the question would be, why are you and I not in the same room doing this? Well,
I know.
because I'm just going to show you. I'm in Indiana at my big sister's house, real quick. See,
So yeah, beautiful in Indiana in May, the start of May.
I'm sitting on a rocking chair like an old lady with a cup of coffee. It's going great. It's a good
Yeah,
start to the
this
day.
this this is the perfect way to do it. And I'm in the office, and we've got, like many of you who are listening, we've got kids. We've got big kids who are working across town. We've got little kids who stole chips out of the pantry and
What?
took them for their breakfast today. And I followed them to school while they were eating their potato
So,
chips.
side note, that's the least of your concerns,
I know
honestly, Johnny.
exactly.
So, Johnny, you are at home parenting alone right now without me, and you are now understanding
Oh, God bless you. God
the
bless you.
gravity of doing it
I
alone.
can't do it for 3 days, let alone 27 years. We've got some things that we're going to talk about today, so I want to just put it out there at the top of the podcast right now, so everyone knows. We're going to talk about specifically screen time with kids. We won't get into all things digital, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to hit
Yeah.
dating. We won't do a 4-hour symposium on dating and the 30 verses that I want to talk about from God's word right now, but we will go over this specific dating question. There's a peer pressure question, and then we're gonna try to just tap into a little bit here at the end, a very specific question on addiction with older kids and how that
Mhm.
starts and family ruin. So the first question, parents out there, everyone, how do you monitor screen time without conflict? When I take away devices, my girls just lay in bed and sleep. I end up yelling at them to get dressed because I'm leaving, and I insist that they leave the house with me. I punish by taking devices away, but my ex thinks I'm too harsh and gives their devices back the next day. That's the question. So this is delves into a few things like co-parenting with a ex-spouse, right? So shared time with kids. It sounds like older kids and morning time and devices. And so, Jen, I know you've got a lot of thoughts. You want to just talk about daily,
Well,
weekly screen time, what our rules
yeah.
are, and how they change in ages. Just an overview, real quick.
Well, first, I just want to say to whoever the mom was that wrote this, that you, at the end of the day, are the parent, and them wanting to spend time with you may not happen for a long time. So you're in it for the long haul. So when you make decisions like taking things away and they throw a fit, well, then you're seeing a symptom of an issue, and we're going to talk later about addiction. I think phones are an addiction for all of us. I think the first thing I would say is, are you modeling for them separation from your phone? That's the first thing. Are you stepping away from your phone to show them what it looks like to not have your head in the phone all the time? That's to all parents. I think that we risk modeling. Our kids soak up what we do. They model from what we do. Their heads are in the phone because our heads are in the phone. So I would say, make a point of being intentional about talking about, I'm not going to be in my phone on this Saturday, or maybe have a Saturday Sabbath and do some fun things. I heard someone say recently that it was in a video I was watching in our mom to mom group, and they make Saturday the Sabbath day, and they put all digital away, and they just go and celebrate the day together and give glory to God in all things. And they do just not expensive and crazy things, but remarkable things. So maybe don't make it a consequence, make it a celebration. Like we're gonna step away because we recognize the health of all of that. And I think there's some value in that. We don't do that, Johnny. You and I have, for the most part, we are consistent and inconsistent at times, but we give and we take. I mean, the Lord gives, the Lord takes. I think we model what the Lord has done. And you give the phone, and you can take the phone because you're an adult, you're the parent, and you get to do those things. But we've talked to our kids. One thing that we have done in our home is you plug your phone in at night and you don't let your kids go to bed with them. And that's a big deal to us, because they're on it all day. Their brains need to rest at night. So if you want to, I don't know if anything you want to play off any of those things,
I
Johnny.
do. Just a couple of like very overarching rules. There's no phones in rooms. Okay.
Yeah.
Phones are in open spaces. That's one rule. Another rule is sometimes we just take your phone and check it. We're allowed to have your
Oh,
passcode.
let me say something on that real
It shouldn't
quick.
be weird. That's not weird if we take your phone and check. Like, you can't do that. That's an invasion
Yeah.
of privacy. It's my phone. And you've got to fight this. And they're going to get mad. And you've got to have a long play, because then they're going to be at school and they're going to talk to other friends, and they're going to be like, well, my mom just takes my phone and checks it. Like, that means you can't. Over the course of 4, 5, 10 years, your kids will interpret all of the things that you do that take time and energy and emotion from you, they'll interpret it as love. Right now, they will not. And you have to be willing to have delayed gratification. You have to be willing to let your kids be mad at you. But if the God in our lives is our kids liking us, instead of us raising kids who fear the Lord, then we're not going to go after the right goal.
Yeah.
You've got to have the right why. That I'm looking at who you are as 27, 28, and I don't care if you don't always like me right now, right? It takes time. This mom who's like, the girls, you know, they just lay in bed. Here's what happens when we don't have constant dopamine. We get bored. And then when they get bored, you're talking about a symptom of boredom. That's great. Do you know what long periods of boredom brings?
Creativity.
Creativity. Necessity is the mother of invention. And when it's necessary for them to do something to release some dopamine because there's no quick, easy dopamine, they'll start to be like, what are you doing? Well, I decided to paint. Why? Because I got so bored.
They don't have time. Yeah, they need the time. So can I say one thing to your the long play? Wait, what was that? I got lost in there. There's a couple things I was going to say. Oh shoot, I lost it. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I lost it.
We were talking about just overall rules for screen time. You know, another thing is we don't do video games during the week for kids. This is for kids. We do them on the weekend.
That's wait. That made me think about what I was going to say. Yeah, you're in it for the long haul, and they might be 35 and have their own kids before they come back and tell you thank you for the disciplines that you helped them set. We help our kids become disciplined because of their own accord. They will never discipline themselves. That's why we're parents. We parent to establish disciplines in their lives so that they can manage themselves and be healthy adults. And that is the hard, honestly, I think raising teenagers, that is the hardest piece, because that requires a lot of us also being disciplined. And I think you know, explaining, one of the things I want to say was explaining to your kids, don't just take their phones in anger. Take them on times when you're not mad and talk to them about the mental health issues that are going on in the world, and tell them that you're trying to create some coping mechanisms in their life so that when they're grown adults, they can handle job and family. And because the real risk here, yes, it's not good for them now. What's really at risk is it's not good for them later. And so I think if we think for the future road of, like Johnny said, 25, 35, we're looking at healthy adults who can engage with their families and cope and have coping mechanisms. Laying in your bed because you don't have what you want isn't a great coping mechanism. And I understand that's not really what you want to tell your kids necessarily, but you might want to talk about, hey, maybe you're laying in your bed because you don't know how to handle not having something that you want, and then walk through that when you're not mad at them. Talk about these things when you're not mad at them. Do not talk about these things when you're angry with them.
And I think this goes into the next subject of dating. And I want to bridge it with this idea. Imagine it's a quiet evening at home and it's no big deal. And you take your child's phone, more in the screen time issue, and they start to lose their mind. And they say things like, you don't understand. No, I have to have it. No, mom, it's not about that. Let me interpret for you. They have a secret hidden world that you have no idea what's going on. There are movies out. When I was a kid, the movies were called Goonies. Now the movie is called Stranger Things. I want to tell you what's going on in this movie. The children have an underworld going on. And there's real things that are life altering. I mean, life or death. And the parents are oblivious. That's not what you want. And so when you grab the phone just to check in, they start to freak out. It really gives you an opportunity to start to talk about things that really matter to them. And their friends matter.
Yeah.
Their popularity or the way they're accepted is such a big deal. They're trying to find themselves. And when you tell your child at 9 or 18, I love you, here's what they're going to do. They're going to try to evaluate if you really do love them. Okay.
Well, so I think that is really valuable, being in it with them and knowing what they're in. I think, you know, you and I with Riley ran some risks when he was about 14, 15. We were 15. We were probably we were very naive. We were very, busy in our jobs and not fully engaged into what was happening. And there's going to be, think back to when you were a teenager, there were things that you did and things that you went and did that your parents didn't know about. So there's always going to be an underworld. That's part of them learning to grow up and be away from you and make choices and do things. But I think digging in enough to know who they're hanging out with and having these conversations about dating and all of the things before if you can. And I know that not everybody can backtrack, and I'm not saying it's too late. I don't think it's too late forever. I don't ever think it's too late. It's never too late for you and I in the name of Jesus. He comes and he saves us and he loves us to repentance every day. So, but I think you have to have these conversations about relationships before it happens. Dating, we talked about this last week. I think the first thing you need to establish with your kids, if you get a chance, is like, who's okay for you to date? Like, what does it look like for you to date a non-Christian? What age? That was the question. What age is okay? You and I have established with our boys, even Marielle, who's 13, and we just got him in our home less than 2 years ago. He knows it's 16. You have to be old enough to drive and old enough to pay and old enough to ask their dad. Those are some things I want you to hit on, Johnny, because I think those are things you established with the boys and set a precedent for just bringing chivalry back. And
the dad or the mom, if the dad's not in the
yes, dad or mom or grandma, whoever's raising the kid.
You have to ask whoever's in authority.
Yep. Yes. I think recognizing the authority, but I think you establish these things, have these conversations. You and I had an older couple in our lives that talked about non-negotiables, and they would have their kids sign a sheet that was a list of non-negotiables. The top of that list was
those kids made the sheet.
They made the sheet. Yeah, they had to decide. They had to spend some time, and then it was a contract with their parents that they hung in their home, which I thought was incredible. We didn't do that. I thought that's a great idea. We should have probably done that, but whatever. We had a mental contract written. But I think just establishing like non-negotiables. I will not date a non-Christian. That to me is a non-negotiable. And then the age, I think you have to determine that with you and your kids.
I would love to like spin this age thing. The question was, what's the right age to allow my kids to date? Well, here's my question for you. Let me ask some other questions of you. What's the right age for your kid to become so emotionally involved with the beauty of another person that's created in the image of God that they want to wrap their life around that person and start to make major life decisions based upon the whims of that other person, up into including the following: where I go to school and what city I live in, and giving away my sexuality. Mm-hmm. That's what you ask. So what age do you want your young person to feel like they're going to have sex? Because here's what happens when you start dating. God made you to want to date. He physically made us who we are. And Solomon says it's an engine. And the engine is dormant, right? Mm-hmm. And when we do things when they're little, like, oh, that's cute. Oh, look, oh, your boyfriend and girlfriend. Or like, oh my goodness, they're holding hands. When we do things like that, you know what? It is kind of cute. It's kind of puppy love, and it's cute. But the problem is we start an engine. Mm-hmm. So the engine is made this way. Once the engine started, the engine only knows how to run as a high performance machine. It's not a golf cart, it's a Ferrari. So when you start up the Ferrari and hand the keys to a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, well, Johnny said they can't date until they're 17. No, here's when they can date. Because you've fallen in love. You're an adult. You know that you go from, I kind of like that person too. I can't work. I can't sleep. I'm enthralled with them. And then really, not to be coarse in any way, but what you want to do is you want to be what God made us for, which is intimate.
Back when the boys were little, I used to talk to an older mom in my life, Debbie Greer, Kevin and Debbie Greer. They raised 3 boys, so I always would pick her brain. And they told us something just over dinner. They mentioned something that you and I held on to. And it's something you just said. I think the big thing is don't playfully celebrate early relationships. I think keep your kids a little bit awkward for a while. Don't let them grow up too quick, and don't be happy when they are all of a sudden really attractive to the opposite sex. That's dangerous. They get it too soon. And so I would say don't celebrate the little parties that you send them to, and you're like, well, we're going to invite boys for the first time at 13. Well, okay, well, what you're inviting into their world is something like you said, the engine starting too soon, and recognition of things that they need to wait on, because you don't want them to get married at 16. You need them to hang on. And so don't celebrate relationships too early. Celebrate other things. Celebrate strengths in character. Celebrate accomplishments in school and alongside the opposite sex is fine. I think you can have friends and hang out with families as families together and celebrate those things.
So hard and fast rules, it's a different age for every kid. Kids
Yeah.
are different. Kids do need to experience dating. The best way to do that is in large groups. You need to talk with your kids early about your relationship and dating and other models of dating. And if our kids' dating lives are not private, it's
Yeah,
not
we're in
their
it.
relationship.
It's always awkward, but we're right there.
It's our relationship. And that's always been weird for girls when they're dating the family. It's like, yeah, you got to be in our family 360. Why? Well, because our kids are smart enough to leave their phone somewhere, go with just you. Okay. And route their texts to a
Well,
computer.
and that kind of
so they can still text us. Think about that. They can still text.
Bringing the girl close to us, tightening them in has either kept them closer and weeded out the ones that were not dateable for our boys naturally by squeezing them in. You know, you can squeeze them real tight, squeeze them close, or squeeze it, and he'll squeeze them out if it doesn't work out. So it's been a little bit of a sifting process too by doing that.
So, the other thing would be with this, you have an opportunity in dating. Dating is for marriage.
Yeah.
That's it.
Courting, the old-fashioned word.
It's for marriage. And so here's what you have to gain: a son or a daughter. And you know what they have to gain? A parent. And our culture is so fixated on just the individual couple. It's never about the individual couple. For thousands of years, it's been about the family unit. And when you train your kids to talk about Thanksgiving for 30 years, that's really what a marriage is, right? And the spouse relationship is super important, and that's got to click, and there's got to be chemistry. But sometimes we get that in front of the fact, and you get really close as a dating relationship, and then you realize that they hate your mother. And you're going to live for 30 years with two women that you love, a girl and a mother, and they hate. So the faster you get them in the family, the easier it is to answer that age of how old are my kids allowed to date, And so,
well, and one of the things that I absolutely love that you really pushed with the boys, Johnny, is that you make them here's for boys. Like, I'm not raising girls. I mean, I've got the best daughter-in-law in the world. I didn't get to raise her. She's been raised beautifully. But raising boys, we told them they had to be able to communicate to the father well enough to say, I want to date your daughter. And then when they're, and that a 12-year-old probably isn't going to be able to do that. So I think that means that the age is, for us, again, I would say the age for us, if you want to know our honest opinion, we think it's 16 when they can drive and when they can pay. And they can ask the dad.
Yeah, those are some at least benchmarks that are there. And I think this goes into peer pressure because a lot of this is about peer pressure. We could write 13 chapters on this issue and just start it. It's a major issue with kids. And I think the themes of screen time and dating fall into peer pressure. Get this. Most of us would say, I don't want to go back to be a kid again because we know that it was just hard. And we know we could go back, and we're wise enough now that we can navigate it better, but it would just be a different kind of hard because other kids are mean and it's tough. And our kids have feelings and they don't know how to communicate our feelings. So here's our job as parents. Our job as parents is to swallow up awkwardness because there's things deep down in our kids that they can't articulate. I need your help. I don't even know how to explain it to myself, so I don't know how to explain to you how I'm feeling. I don't know why I feel the way I feel tonight. Imagine coming home and something happened, and as a parent, if you knew the incident, you could explain the incident, and you could help them put it in a box and understand it, and then move on and have a good dinner and a good night. They just feel icky. I remember this happening to me when I was a kid, where a girl down the road wanted me to just come over to her house. Right? I was 12 and she just wanted to come over to her house. And I was like, I feel I'm weird. This is weird. I don't know. And the whole night I was in a funk and I didn't know how to tell my mom. I was like, I want to play G.I. Joes with my buddy John. And this girl wants me to come over and I don't think her parents are around and I don't want anything to do with it. And it ruined my night. When my mom said what was wrong, I didn't even know how to tell her. This problem of articulation, it is the main problem in peer pressure with kids. And here's your weapon. Mom and dad, here's your weapon. You have to ask enough questions to get into some specifics so that you understand things better than your kids, peer pressure moments. And then you can help compartmentalize, or you can help set something up. You can help explain something, because what you really want to deliver back to your kids is the freedom of childhood, right?
Mhm.
And when you can just let them have dinner with the family, have a family movie night, play outside and go to bed and think about what you want to be when you grow up. I mean, how we think about how wonderful that is, and it gets stolen because I don't like myself at school, and I don't like that group of kids, and I don't want to have to do this thing to be liked by them. And if we don't get into their lives, what Jennifer is continually describing is you got to be a little bit of a detective, and it takes
But
time. This is why
yes,
questions
can I
matter.
can I dive into that though?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
think there's a risk from detective to helicopter.
Oh yeah,
Um,
great point,
you know,
Jen.
in that book that I recommended, and I think actually one of our women's groups are going to walk through it, Teen Proofing by Dr. John Rosamond. He says that it's a dance with your kids, and when they're young, you're dancing close, you're keeping them close, but as they grow, you're starting to allow them a little bit of rope away from you, a little bit of a ways away from you, and then when there's an issue, you bring them back close again. So it's a dance. And I think detective is so important. We rent out Riley and Aiden Finley if you need to borrow them. They're amazing detectives because they've been through some
Right.
things, right? But being a detective, that's hard because we're not trained, with all of things. But I would say being in it enough with them to know when you can let them go a little bit and when you need to pull them back in. And so that's intentional parenting, and that's hard, and it's tough when you're working and you come home. You and I fall into this trap where we get really complacent in our parenting, and we are busy, and we come home and we're ready to go to bed at 4 p.m. That happens a lot in our home because we're just tired. But being in it enough to have conversations and letting them know the dance. I talk with Mariano. Again, we only have had Mariano. I'm talking about this because I want to talk to the parent who feels like they've wasted too much time and they're too far behind. Here's the deal. I don't think it's too late. And with Mariano and Mariano, we talk about how the days of teenage could be tough. We aren't sure how that's going to go, and we weren't in charge of raising him up until he was 8. But I talk to him about that, and I tell him, and I say, Mariano, when he gets in trouble about something, I point out how the big kids have freedoms to go and do some things and have a car, and those are earned privileges. Those are not promises. And so I talk with him, you and I talk with him about what it looks like to be a bigger kid and the responsibility of that and being trustworthy and all of those things. This doesn't really go with peer pressure, but I wanted to say that. And then I got one more thing to say about peer pressure, but talk with your kids about what it's going to be like when they're a child who lives in obedience and lives in and a child that trusts the Lord with their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I think those are things you have to talk to your kids about the peer pressure. Here's my thoughts on that. You got to tell your kids, first of all, and I remember I heard this from somewhere, and I can't give credit to it. I might not want to give credit to where I heard it. Your kids are going to be in a world that doesn't love them. You should tell them that. You should tell them that. You love them at home and the world doesn't.
You're great. You're great.
Yeah.
Like, no, you're not.
Yeah, like be honest with your kids. You're going to go to school and there's going to be some people who don't like you. And start to talk with them about that. Like, you're going to be disliked, and how you deal with that is going to determine a lot of things. And that's part of that trustworthy piece, how you deal with not being liked. Because a lot of times peer pressure comes from that need to be liked. And that's an insecurity breeds terrible decisions. And so give them the security to know that out there, no one likes you. Home, we are going to love you to death, and giving them that safe place to fall and allowing them to come home, in a funk and walk through that with you. Those were my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of the same themes of just being available. I started to describe that conversation in a kid's head of imagine a child, and things happen and they've got to navigate life. And the one question they're going to ask themselves, who do I turn to? And, someone offered them drugs, or a friend's going to kill themselves, or they're being bullied, or someone touched them in a way they shouldn't. Like, think of all these things that could potentially happen. And they're at a crisis point. They're trying to deal with their toolbox. How do I navigate life? And this goes into our last question. The question they're asking is, who do I turn to? And so when Jennifer's made a couple of counterpoints to me throughout our podcast today of a tension, like a gray space of push in, pull out, push in, pull out. What you're trying to do is create an environment where your child says, my parents don't try to run my life. my parents want to be oracles and guides and mentors, and their advice isn't selfish. Sometimes parents, what they communicate to their kids is, hey, you do what you're supposed to do because I don't have time to mess with any problems from you. And you do what you're supposed to do because I don't want to, for my career to be ruined or for my life to be interrupted or for me to be embarrassed. And you know what that kid does? That kid doesn't turn to you. And what Jennifer's describing is um, truly communicating to a kid in little subtle ways over time. Even when they're mad at you, they take the phones and the girls are pouting. They want to date someone and you're not going to let them right. Say, hey, mom loves you. And they're like, whatever. It's like, no, 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 listen to me. I'm going to be praying for you all day today. And then you check in later. And our hope is that over a period of not weeks, but years, we'll build this framework where our kids go, I have to tell mom and dad this right now. Most of the time, Jennifer and I watch shows and TVs. We're big into the arts because we love the idea of story. And most of the time, we say to ourselves, this whole show would be over. We're show wreckers because we could end an entire show with one family group text. Hey, Bill, the bad guy's in the closet, and this wouldn't be an issue if you had obeyed us and not gone to the party you weren't supposed to go to. And we don't want to die tonight. So please obey us and come home. We found you on 360. And what we're trying to communicate to everyone is tell your kids that you're really there. And this addiction, our adult children, they're suffering from addiction. And what kind of help is there for the family? If Jennifer, if you were in our room right now, we'd want to know the specifics. And every case is complex and different. And what we always want to do when we're talking to people is we want to bring hope. We do. We want to bring hope. But we also want to bring tools. Okay? Because we've been a part of some scenarios that they wrapped up quick and maybe some advice was given or God swooped in and something else happened. Okay. But we've also been a part of some long roads. And so one of the things that we said on the last week's podcast that goes over this is with addiction one, the best time to deal with something is now. There are gateway drugs. And if you as a parent act like, well, this is no big deal. I'm sorry, it is a big deal. Like I'm going to say this, marijuana is a gateway drug. Why am I against marijuana? Because marijuana leads to other things. Not always in every person. I know some people that smoke marijuana and it's like, oh, it's no big deal to make. Okay, here's what happens out of most people I know most times. The person who sells marijuana also sells something that's not marijuana. And if you show up to buy marijuana when someone else shows up. So I'm saying all that, the underworld of drugs, like this just turned into CSI with Johnny or some cop show. No, here's the deal with your child. Make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
Early.
Make a big deal about it in a world that's not making a big deal about it. We live in a world that makes light of these things. And I to your darkness, I don't want to forget this before you say your next thing, so don't forget where you're going. But that underworld, Priscilla Shirer used the analogy of an upside down canoe boat that she would take her kids out fishing, and there'd be a boat they'd have to flip over. And every time that they flipped that boat over, because it was dark space when it was upside down, the creepy crawlies would be in there waiting, the snakes, the caterpillar, all the things with bugs and all the things would be underneath. And she would hate to flip the canoe over because there would be creepy crawlies that scared her, the gross stuff, right? She said that there wasn't an invitation to the dark underworld for the snake. The snake knew where to go because it was dark. And I think with your kids, you got to remember that if they're living in darkness and they're around darkness and their friends are in darkness, that they don't even have to invite the enemy in. The enemy's already there. He's in that. And I think this world of drugs and addiction, it really starts with who their friends are. It starts with, if we go back to addiction in young, because you and I walked that with Riley. If we go back to who they hang out with, what they're doing, he didn't even have to invite some of the things that came into his life. It was just there. It was already there because he was living with darkness around him, and the creepy crawlies and the enemy and the serpent, the snake. He's a real force that's coming for your kids' hearts. And I think you have to recognize, number one, the spiritual warfare in your family and on your children's lives. And the more that I believe this to be true, the more you're making a kingdom impact, the more that the enemy will come and try to stop you, and he'll use your kids against you. You and I have lived that. And I think that there are some things you can do to get in front of addiction. And I think there are some things that your kids are going to have to determine on their own, or your grown children at this point on their own are going to have to determine on their own. And you yourself can put some guardrails in and walk them through these things. But when it comes to adults, I have one thing I want to say to that. Your weapon right now, and your only weapon right now, is prayer. And it's laying that young man, young girl down at the foot of Jesus. That's all you have. You can't control their addiction, and they will not stop it until they're ready. They have to want it. And that's not your job. It isn't. It's God's job. That's God's job. At this point in the adult life of a young man, young woman is addicted to something, it has to be their personal desire to stop. No program, no rehab, no conversation. Your conversations might even just draw them deeper into the drug world. And so I think that have productive prayer life. And what I mean by that is daily, and you let them know. When Riley was going through a season and he got to he was at an age where he was making a lot of his own choices. I just would tell him, buddy, I have been up praying for you since 4 a.m. and I need you to know that. And let them know how deep, and be the warrior for them. Tell them you're going to be on your knees for them when they can't.
Yeah, I've got this picture that I think is the best picture. We're gonna actually preach about it on Sunday, and it takes me back to a moment because I'm picturing an adult write this question here, and this adult is like, what do I do? Imagine maybe you're a grandparent, you're watching grandkids, and first you have to set up boundaries, okay? But in the picture of the Bible that we get about who God is, God stands on the porch as the Father, and He waits for the prodigal son to return. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, but here's what Jesus did. Jesus was telling that story, and He knew the Father. Jesus is someone who left the Father's home and came down to where the pigs were and picked you up and said, I can make all this better. Hold your hand, and walks you back to the Father. There was a moment for Riley, our oldest, where I could have gone to bed early. I could have not worried about it. But I got in a car and I drove across town to a party. And I walked into the party, which was awkward for all the kids at the party. And there was nothing horrific happening at this party, but this was what was called the launch pad at the party, okay? Horrific things were going to launch from this party later that night. And Riley was mortified. He was mortified. I imagine maybe you're listening to this podcast and you're a grandma, or you're a mom, and I'm like, no, you got to go. Imagine if you walked into a place where your kid was and everyone's like, oh my, here's all it would ever communicate to your child. They love me. They will be mortified. There are times when you have to go out for the one. Yeah. Jesus left the 99 and you've got to go for the one. You got to be wise. You got to be smart. But I'm telling you what, the end of Jude, the book of Jude, it closes with a concept of snatching people from fire. Whose job is it? Who else is going to go barge a door down and get your kid? Who loves your kid more than you? Does the Father? Yeah. You're not capable of going on a rescue mission. You can't do it all the time. You can't do it over and over again. You might need to do it enough times, though, that child says, they'll come for me. I'm not alone. You will die one day. And your kids have to know
I love you saying, I think if we could end on something here, Johnny, I would just love to reach out to that mom and our dad and just say, you're not alone in this. Don't feel like you're alone in this. And knowing you can trust the Lord, of course, that's the top of it, but that lots of families are going through this. And I forgot that you had done that, and I forgot how powerful that was. And that I think you at least got to try it once. I don't know how many times you can do that, but at least let them know you're gonna have that safe place to fall. Always be that safe place to fall. Always be that safe place to fall without enabling. That's a whole other topic. I don't think we have time for that. But praying, I still go back to this. I think, having a good prayer life when your kids are far from you is a powerful tool that, regardless of what else you can do, that is one thing you can control in your life, is how you pray.
So we're going to close, but this specific question, a specific person wrote this question. We're answering real questions. And it said, there's not much help for the family who is left in ruin because of the behavior of this individual. Let me pause that. I want to rebuke the thought. There is help. Mm-hmm. And you are not left in ruin. If you are abiding in Jesus and harm has come to you, you're still in peace. You can rebuild. Control what you can control and leave to God what you can't. But you have to watch the words of your mouth because you are not left in ruin. Be in peace. Even if your family member is not in peace, you can choose peace. And then that peace will spill on them because you'll be a refuge of peace. You cannot be frantic because of the damage that they have done. And
No,
we're not doormats. More than willing to meet with you about some tactics about how you can be wise in your specific scenario to cause less damage in the future. We love answering these questions. There's a lot that's going on here. Jennifer and I could have spent a lot more time pulling things from God's word in these. We're going to be addressing some of these topics this week. I cannot wait for this weekend. So, church, let's be praying. God's going to do some healing in our church this weekend in these issues of parents and children and the father. So, Jennifer, you have a great day with.
I'll see you tomorrow. Hey, can you clean the house before I get home? Clean the house before I get home.
I'm probably going home right now. Love you. Bye.
Bye.